What happens when a friendly late-night interview turns into one of the most uncomfortable moments in television history? Tonight, we're breaking down the shocking exchange between Jimmy Fallon and Mikey. Day that left the audience silent, the crew scrambling, and ended with security escorting one of comedy's biggest names off the stage. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think really caused this explosive confrontation. Now, let's get into what actually went down. The Tonight Show stage was set like any other evening. The band wrapped up their energetic introduction. The familiar applause echoed through Studio 6B, and Jimmy Fallon jogged out with his trademark grin, waving to the crowd as if nothing in the world could possibly go wrong. This was supposed to be routine, comfortable. Two comedians, one desk, a few laughs, and a smooth promo run. Mikey Day stepped out moments later, greeted by applause, flashing a polite smile as he took his seat across from Jimmy. On paper, it was a perfect match. Former cast member turned late-night host interviewing a current Saturday Night Live star. Easy chemistry, shared history. Jimmy leaned forward immediately, radiating warmth. Mikey Day, everybody. Man, it's so good to have you here. I feel like we never really get to hang out. Mikey nodded, thanking him, his tone friendly but reserved. At first, nothing seemed off. Jimmy praised a recent sketch, laughing about watching it at home, describing how hard it made him laugh. The audience chuckled along, but the cameras caught something subtle. Mikey's smile didn't fully land. His shoulders stiffened just slightly. When Jimmy asked about the writing process, Mikey answered carefully, emphasizing the team, the room, the collaboration. Jimmy, riding the nostalgia, drifted into stories about his own time on the show, reminiscing about the thrill of live sketches and the chaos behind the scenes. The audience laughed, but there was a pause afterward that felt heavier than a joke's beat. Mikey leaned back, arms crossing. "It's different for everyone," he said, flatly. Jimmy didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. He pushed forward, asking about favorite sketches, tossing out titles and characters. That's when Mikey's patience cracked. His voice stayed calm, but the words landed sharp. "Jimmy, can I ask you something?" The room quieted instantly. When Mikey questioned whether Jimmy actually watched the show or just read note cards, the silence became suffocating. Jimmy laughed it off, but Mikey corrected him, pointing out that Jimmy had described the wrong sketch entirely. The audience sensed it then. This wasn't a bit. This wasn't playful banter. Something real was surfacing, and no one knew where it was going to land. What happens when a friendly late-night interview turns into one of the most uncomfortable moments in television history? Tonight, we're breaking down the shocking exchange between Jimmy Fallon and Mikey. Day that left the audience silent, the crew scrambling, and ended with security escorting one of comedy's biggest names off the stage. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think really caused this explosive confrontation. Now, let's get into what actually went down. The laughter that usually filled Studio 6B never quite returned after that moment. Jimmy tried to recover, flashing his familiar grin, joking about weeks blurring together. But Mikey didn't let it slide. He leaned forward, eyes locked on Jimmy, and calmly pointed out how every interview seemed to turn into a nostalgia tour about Jimmy's own glory days. The words weren't shouted. They were measured, which somehow made them cut deeper. The audience shifted in their seats, unsure whether they were allowed to laugh anymore. Jimmy adjusted his tie, chuckling nervously. "I'm just trying to relate," he said. "We've got that shared experience." Mikey shook his head slowly. "We don't," he replied. He explained that the show Jimmy remembered no longer existed in the same way. Different writers, different pressures, different expectations. Each sentence stripped away the comfort of familiarity Jimmy was clinging to. The band sat frozen, instruments idle, sensing the tension rising. When Jimmy suggested taking a break, Mikey refused. He wanted the conversation to continue, to move past surface-level jokes and into something real. He accused Jimmy of phoning it in with guests who weren't considered top-tier stars, of treating interviews like checkboxes instead of conversations. Gasps rippled through the audience. Jimmy stood abruptly, his cue cards scattering across the desk, his voice sharp with defensiveness. This was no longer friendly television banter. This was personal. Mikey stood as well, matching Jimmy's energy. He spoke about authenticity, about caring, about the difference between performance and connection. Jimmy fired back, reminding him whose stage this was, whose show it was. That's when Mikey laughed, bitter and humorless, calling it what it was, a network studio, not a personal kingdom. The audience audibly reacted, phones lifting as people realized they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. Jimmy's composure cracked completely. His voice rose, accusing Mikey of bitterness, of jealousy, of resenting the success Jimmy had achieved. The words landed like a slap. Mikey didn't yell. He simply stared back, disappointed, as if this reaction had confirmed everything he feared was true. When Jimmy finally snapped, telling him to get out and calling for security, the shock was total. No music, no laughter, just stunned silence as guards appeared from the wings. Mikey's final words echoed as, "What happens when a friendly late-night interview turns into one of the most uncomfortable moments in television history?" Tonight, we're breaking down the shocking exchange between Jimmy Fallon and Mikey. Day that left the audience silent, the crew scrambling, and ended with security escorting one of comedy's biggest names off the stage. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think really caused this explosive confrontation. Now, let's get into what happened next. As Mikey disappeared into the wings, escorted by visibly uneasy security guards, the studio remained frozen in shock. No applause followed. No nervous laughter. Jimmy stood behind his desk, staring toward the exit as if he couldn't quite believe what had just unfolded. His chest rose and fell quickly, his face flushed, his hands gripping the desk hard enough that his knuckles turned white. The moment stretched on far longer than television ever allows. Finally, Jimmy turned back toward the audience, forcing a familiar smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, that was something," he said, his voice cracking just slightly. The silence in response was deafening. He tried again, running a hand through his hair, glancing down at the scattered cards on his desk. We're going to take a quick break." The stage manager cut to commercial, but the tension didn't disappear with the cameras. Behind the scenes, chaos erupted. Crew members whispered urgently. Producers argued in hushed but frantic tones, and phones started buzzing almost immediately. The footage was already spreading. Audience members were replaying clips, uploading shaky recordings, texting friends. Something irreversible had just happened, and everyone in the building knew it. Backstage, Mikey stood quietly with the guards, the adrenaline draining from his body. Crew members avoided eye contact as he walked past, some out of discomfort, others out of fear. His phone vibrated nonstop in his pocket. Messages, missed calls, notifications piling up faster than he could process. Whatever this confrontation had started, it was already bigger than both of them. On stage, Jimmy sat heavily in his chair, staring at nothing. A producer approached him carefully, clipboard clutched to her chest. She spoke softly but firmly, telling him they needed to address what just happened when they returned. Jimmy snapped back at first, insisting he'd been attacked, humiliated on his own show. But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his expression. The producer didn't argue. She simply told him the truth wasn't landing the way he thought it was. When the countdown to return from commercial began, Jimmy looked lost. For the first time all night, there was no script, no joke, no safety net. "What do I say?" he asked quietly. "The truth," the producer replied. The cameras came back on. Jimmy's tone was different now. Softer, less performative. He admitted, "What happens when a friendly late-night interview turns into one of the most uncomfortable moments in television history?" Tonight, we're breaking down the shocking exchange between Jimmy Fallon and Mikey. Day that left the audience silent, the crew scrambling, and ended with security escorting one of comedy's biggest names off the stage. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think really caused this explosive confrontation. Now, let's get into how it all finally came to a head. Jimmy sat there under the studio lights, the familiar energy of the show completely drained. When he began speaking again, it wasn't with a punchline or a playful grin. His voice was quieter, steadier, and unmistakably real. He admitted that the confrontation caught him off guard, that he reacted out of defensiveness instead of listening. Each sentence felt heavy, as if he were choosing honesty over comfort in real time. The audience remained silent, not out of shock now, but out of focus. He talked about exhaustion, about doing a show night after night, and slowly slipping into habits that feel safe. The note cards, the familiar stories, the laughs he knew would land. He confessed that sometimes those habits made interviews feel less human, less connected. Saying it out loud seemed to cost him something. The camera stayed close, capturing every flicker of vulnerability on his face. Jimmy apologized. Not with a joke, not with a deflection. A direct apology to Mikey Day, to the audience, and to his own team. He admitted removing Mikey from the stage was wrong, that it was his ego taking control. The words hung in the air, raw and uncomfortable, but honest. Slowly, a few people in the audience began to clap, unsure if they should. Jimmy stopped them, shaking his head. He wasn't asking for approval. He was owning the moment. He ended the show early, saying none of them were in the right headspace to continue pretending everything was fine. As the cameras cut, the audience sat quietly, processing what they'd witnessed. Some whispered. Others stared at the stage, knowing they had seen something unscripted and rare. In another part of the building, Mikey packed his belongings in silence. Scrolling through messages he wasn't ready to answer. His words had landed, but the cost was still unknown. Outside the studio, conversations exploded online. Clips went viral. Opinions split. Some praised Mikey for his honesty. Others criticized him for crossing a line. And many questioned Jimmy in a way they never had before. By the time the studio emptied, nothing felt the same. A single interview had cracked the polished surface of late-night television, exposing something fragile underneath. And whether it led to change or fallout, one thing was certain. This was a moment no one involved would ever forget.